The world has always known men who were satisfied with power, and men who were not. Vito Genovese belonged firmly to the second group. To understand him, you have to go back to the early days of New York's Italian neighborhoods. Blocks where families lived on top of each other, where hard work and harder luck shaped entire generations. Children learned quickly that success came only in two forms: honest labor or ruthless ambition. Vito chose the latter before he was old enough to shave. He grew up watching the strong survive and the weak disappear. In those narrow streets, a boy learned his place early, and Vito decided his place would never be beneath anyone. Even as a teenager, he displayed the traits that would later define him: a cold patience, a heavy stare, and an iron certainty that the world owed him something more. The opportunities of the underworld called to him long before he understood the full cost. Gambling, collections, street enforcement, none of it bothered him. If something needed doing, Vito did it without hesitation. If someone needed convincing, he could be very persuasive. And if someone needed removing, well, Vito was the kind of man who didn't blink at necessity. But Vito did not rise alone. He grew alongside two names that echoed across the underworld: Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello, men who saw potential in him early. They were young wolves circling the same future, but while Lucky and Costello were visionaries, Vito was something else, a man whose ambition had no ceiling. When prohibition swept across America, making liquor illegal and fortunes inevitable, Vito found himself in the perfect storm. He ran operations with brutal efficiency, creating pipelines of shipments that stretched from Florida to the Bronx. Money flowed, respect followed, and soon, the streets whispered his name the way soldiers whisper the name of a rising general. Still, it was not enough. Not the money, not the influence, not even the fear he commanded. Vito looked at the world Lucky and Costello were building, a national criminal empire forged through strategy and diplomacy, and he wanted it all. Not shared, not balanced, not negotiated. He wanted it for himself. And in the underworld, wanting something that big always had a price. It was during those years that Vito realized he was a man built for more than one lifetime. He would climb, step by step, over anyone who stood between him and the top, whether friend, rival, or mentor. The question wasn't whether Vito wanted everything. The question was how far he would go to get it. And the answer, as history would show, was as far as necessary. The year was 1937, and Vito Genovese stepped onto American soil after years in Italy with the quiet authority of a man returning to a kingdom he believed was his by right. He had fled the country during a legal storm, an accusation tying him to a killing he preferred the newspapers forget. Italy had sheltered him. More importantly, Italy had sharpened him. While living under Mussolini's regime, Vito had brushed shoulders with diplomats, officers, and power brokers. He learned how influence worked at the highest levels. He learned how to bend officials without them realizing they had been bent. Now, back in New York, he planned to use all of it. But the world had changed during his absence. Prohibition was gone. Lucky Luciano had been imprisoned. And Frank Costello, smooth, connected, political Costello, had stepped in to keep the organization afloat in Lucky's name. To Vito, it felt like a violation. Lucky was a king without a throne. Costello was the steward who held power. But Vito believed the throne should have always been his. He visited Lucky shortly after his return. No cameras, no crowds, just two men on opposite sides of a prison table. Lucky watched him carefully, seeing the ambition burning behind Vito's calm expression. "You're back," Lucky said. "I never left," Vito replied. Neither man needed to raise his voice. They understood each other perfectly. Lucky had built the empire. Vito had come to take it. And so began a silent battle that spread through the underworld like smoke through a room. Costello, with his political charm, kept peace with senators and mayors. His strength was influence. His weapon was diplomacy. He had no desire for bloodshed, no appetite for street wars. To many, he represented stability after years of chaos. But stability was not what Vito wanted. He wanted loyalty built on fear, businesses controlled through force, territories ruled by a heavy hand. and above all, total authority. He visited old allies, reminding them of past favors. He resurrected old debts. He promised stronger leadership. He painted Costello as weak, outdated, soft. At night, phones rang in union offices, gambling parlors, and backroom bars with quiet messages. Vito's back. He's reclaiming everything. He won't accept second place. Choose your side. Some men rushed to him. Others hesitated. Everyone felt the tension tightening like a noose. Costello tried to reason with him once. Just once. In a private room dimly lit by a single lamp, Costello leaned forward. "We can run this together, Vito. There's room." Vito smiled, that small, unsettling smile he had perfected. "There is only room for one." From that moment, Costello knew there would be no peace. No compromise. No partnership. Vito was willing to burn the entire empire to claim it. The Shadow King had returned, and he was almost ready to strike. By the 1950s, New York's underworld existed in a fragile balance. Frank Costello held the reins, guiding the criminal empire through politics, alliances, and quiet deals. It was a calm era, an era Lucky had trusted him to maintain. But calm does not last long when ambition breathes behind it. Vito spent years building his base, pulling old loyalties from the ground like buried treasure. He expanded rackets, tightened grip over neighborhoods, and pushed fear back into places where Costello had traded it for diplomacy. Some said Vito ruled with an iron hand. Others said he ruled with an iron fist. Both were true. He never shouted. He never made scenes. He simply acted with cold certainty, like a man removing obstacles from a path only he could see. Costello, meanwhile, grew tired. He preferred high society gatherings, political negotiations, a life of influence rather than violence. But influence meant nothing to men who believed power must be taken, not given. Vito's next move would define the future of organized crime. Plan was set. Quiet, clean, swift. One spring evening, Costello walked through the lobby of his apartment building, unaware that Vito's loyal soldier crouched in the shadows outside. A single shot was fired, meant not necessarily to kill, but to send a message. Costello survived, but the message arrived intact. Vito wanted the throne, and he was willing to take it by force. Costello, shaken and exhausted, made a decision that shocked the underworld. He retired. "I'm done," he said. "I'm too old for this." And just like that, the seat of power was empty. No elections. No ceremonies. No debates. Vito stepped into it with the quiet confidence of a man claiming something long overdue. He became the boss, finally, officially, undeniably. For a time, Vito's rule was exactly what he had always imagined. Absolute control, fear-driven obedience, vast earnings, influence spreading through politicians and businesses. He built operations on a scale that even Lucky might have admired. But ambition is a dangerous companion. Pushes, consumes, and eventually it destroys. The federal government had noticed Vito's unstoppable rise. Investigations mounted. Surveillance increased. Prosecutors circled like silent predators. And unlike Costello, who charmed politicians, Vito made enemies in every direction. In 1959, the inevitable happened. Vito Genovese, the man who had fought, climbed, and strategized his entire life to claim the empire, was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 15 years in prison. He left the streets behind him, knowing he would never again walk them as a free man. Inside the prison walls, Vito aged quickly. His health declined, his influence faded, and his empire, his precious empire, slipped away into the hands of younger, hungrier men. Vito died in 1969, still behind bars. Not with a bang, not with a final act of dominance, but quietly, like a shadow finally disappearing after a lifetime of chasing the sun. The legacy. History remembers Vito Genovese not as a peaceful architect like Lucky, nor as a political brain like Costello, but as something else entirely, a man who wanted everything and lost it all in the end. His story warns of the cost of endless ambition. It shows how power gained through fear collapses under its own weight. And it reminds us that the throne is never truly owned, only borrowed. Vito took it with force, and the world took it back with time.